going to be good tonight. If you've read ahead, you know we're going to see a deception to get the way. Joab knows that David sort of wants Absalom to come back, but he's being hard-headed. We know in chapter 13 that Absalom killed his brother Amnon. That was his half-brother. That was still David's son, because he had raped his sister Tamar. And so he had him killed, and then he was afraid of what David would do to him. So Absalom has left and went to a place of safety, what he thought, because he just didn't know what his daddy would do. So the period of time now that it's happened has been a couple of years, it thinks, and Absalom's been in this place. And so Joab knows that David's not really happy, because it shouldn't be this way. You know, we should love all our children, but sometimes there's just one that sort of catches the sparkle of your eye a little bit more. And for whatever reason, they feel like Absalom's that one. Absalom, it feels like, was more like David. He was beautiful. We're going to talk about his head of hair. He did not cut his hair but once a year. He had such a head of hair that he only cut it once a year because it was so heavy that it just got weighting on his head so much that he would cut it. And you're going to see that his hair causes him partially to lose his life if you've read ahead, but we won't get to that tonight. But it's really good for you to study it. But Joab, you know who Joab is. Now you need to understand. Who can tell me who Joab is? He's David's general of his army. You remember, he's his right-hand man. You go into war. You remember Joab was the one that was out there leading the war when he killed Uriah. He said, send this to Joab, and told Joab put Uriah on the front. So you have to understand who we're talking about, or the story won't make a lot of sense to you. So we see here as beginning chapter 14. I didn't even ask y'all ready. Y'all ready? Y'all know how I am. So Facebook, we're glad that you're with us tonight. Chapter 14, 2 Samuel. Please join in with us as we begin. Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom. Now in this here, he's talking about he was concerned about Absalom. He wouldn't let it be known, because David really dropped the ball in how he handled this situation. David could have handled it so much better. And now Absalom had to leave, and Amnon, his son, was dead, and David just did not handle it very well at all. He should have stepped up and handled it, and Absalom, if he would have handled it in a way that would have been satisfactory, Absalom probably wouldn't have had to kill Amnon, because he could have stepped in and said, Amnon, this is not good what you did, and he could have punished him and might could have set things straight, but he just did nothing. So Joab sent to Tekoa and fetched thence a wise woman. Now we're going to see a deception here. I want you to follow along. It's really good. And said unto her, I pray thee, feign thyself to be a mourner. Now this woman was very smart. Now you know what a mourner is? Back during that time, they had people they could hire to go to funerals, even for an evil person that nobody liked. They would hire these mourners to go to the funerals and cry. They always wanted somebody to cry at a funeral. So he's got this woman. He wants her to be as a mourner. She was really good at what she did, and so she was going to pretend. And it says, and I want you to put on now your mourning apparel, and anoint not thyself with oil, but be as a woman that had a long time mourned for the dead. Now this is all a deception. Joab setting it all up. Watch what it says. And I want you to come to the king, and I want you to speak on this manner unto him. So Joab put the words in her mouth. Now, Joab's doing everything. He's going to tell the lady what to say. So watch what he tells her. And when the woman of Tekoa spake to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and did obeisance and said, help, O king. Now she really putting on a show. When she come to the king, see, back in that time, if you had an issue, you could come to the king for help. And so she's got an issue. Now, I want you to follow what the issue is, because she's going to hit a home run by doing what Joab said. And the king said unto her, what aileth thee? And she answered, I am indeed a widow woman, and my husband is dead. So I know she's got King David's attention. She's a widow lady. He cares. He's a man of God. He does care about the widow ladies. And thy handmaid, that's her, had 2 sons. And they two strove together in the field, and there was none to part them. In other words, they began to fight in the field, and there was none to part them. But the one smote the other and slew him. So here she was, a lady come before the king, husband dead. Her two sons fought in the field. Wasn't anybody there to break them up, and one son killed the other son. Now David's taking all this in. David's believing everything that she's telling him. He don't know about the deception. I sort of like the best of the best. We know about it, but David don't know about it. And behold, the whole family is risen against thine handmaid. And they said, she's got one son left. You think she's done lost her husband and then lost one son? You think, even though he might have did wrong, you think she wants to lose the other son? Mama don't want to lose the other son. And behold, the whole family is risen against me, thine handmaid. And they said, deliver him that smote his brother, that we may kill him. For the life is his brother whom he slew, and we will destroy the heir also, so that they shall squench my coal which is left, and shall not leave to my husband neither name nor remainder upon the earth. And the king said unto the woman, you go to your house, thine house, and I will give charge concerning thee. And the woman of Tekoa said unto the king, my lord, O king, the iniquity be on me and on my father's house. The sin be on me and my father's house. And the king and his throne be guiltless. Now she began to turn the tide on him. Says, now you're saying you're going to help me. My son has killed my other son, and you tell me to go. And the king said, whosoever saith aught unto thee, bring him to me, and he shall not touch thee any more. Then says she, I pray thee, let the king remember the Lord thy God. And you know David, he's always concerned about what the Lord thinks. That thou wouldest not suffer the revengers of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son. And he said, as the Lord liveth, there shall not one hair of thy son fall on the earth. He said, don't you worry about your son. I'm going to make sure that nobody touches your son. And if anybody does touch your son, they're going to have to answer to me. Then she comes in verse 12. Then the woman said, let thine handmaiden, that's her, I pray thee, speak one word unto my lord the king. And he said, say on. Now she's getting brave. She's done everything Joab's told her to do. She's painted that picture to David. David's bit, line, hook, and sinker. He's in. He's upset about them wanting to kill her other son, even though that son might deserve to die. She's painted a good story. That's all I've got left. I don't have anybody else. And then she says, finally, can I say one more thing? And he says, say on. And the woman said, wherefore hast thou thought such a thing against the people of God? For the king doth speak this thing as one which is faulty, and that the king doth not fetch home again his banished. And that word faulty, if you search it out, means guilty. He says, you're speaking as one which is guilty, and that the king doth not fetch home again his banished. And she's talking about Absalom. You have banished Absalom. You're not letting him come home. He just as well be dead, because you've just not included him back to come for what he done. For we must needs die, and are as water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Neither does God respect any person, yet doth he devise means that his banished be not expelled from him. Now it says in verse 15, now therefore that I am come to speak of this thing unto my lord the king, for it is because the people have made me afraid. And thy handmaid said, I will now speak unto the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his handmaid. For the king will hear to deliver his handmaid out of the hand of the man that would destroy me and my son together out of the inheritance of God. He says, since you've agreed to do that for me, then thy handmaid said, the word of my lord the king shall now be comfortable. For as an angel of God, so is my lord the king to discern good and bad. Therefore the Lord thy God will be with thee. Then the king answered and said unto the woman, hide not from me, I pray thee, the thing that I shall ask thee. And the woman said, let my lord the king now speak. Now you're going to see he's a little smarter than what you think. Look what he's going to ask her. He said, you've been asking me all these questions. Is it okay if I ask you something? And the king said this, is not the hand of Joab with thee in all this? Can you see when you really get in there and study verse by verse, can you see the humor a little bit? Here Joab was setting the king up. And King David, you were thinking that he's falling for it hook, line, and sinker. He don't know what's going on. Then all of a sudden we see why David is the king. He says, has Joab got a hand in this? So now what do you think the woman is going to tell him? And the woman answered and said, as thy soul liveth, my lord the king, none can turn to the right hand or to the left from all that my lord the king hath spoken. For thy servant Joab, he bade me, and he put all these words in the mouth of thine handmaid. She come clean. She wasn't going to lie to the king because it wouldn't be good to lie to the king. To fetch about a form of speech hath thy servant Joab done this thing. And my Lord is wise according to the wisdom of an angel of God to know all things that are in the earth. Now, can I stop there 1 second? I've been doing a lot of reading. Well, let me tell you where Joab stayed. I really think Joab, if you study it out, he thought he was doing a good thing. We're going to see what happens here in chapter 15. We're going to see it's not a good thing to bring Absalom back. But I really think he thought that he was doing a good thing by bringing Absalom back. But we're going to see in just a second, even though he brought Absalom back, David did a bad thing when he brought Absalom back, and it made things worse. It could have been better for them just to remain apart if David wasn't going to do better than what we see that he did. But I want you to see in Joab's mind, Joab is trying to put a father and a son back together that he thought should be back together. Absalom was the son that everybody liked also, and you're going to see how good a politician he is in just a few minutes. And the king said unto Joab, behold now, I have done this thing. Go therefore and bring the young man Absalom home again. So we see here that it worked. Joab's little plot with the lady and come before the king. The king didn't get mad. The king probably thought, so I know Joab's trying to help, and it's probably time for Absalom. It's been a while. It's probably time for Absalom to come home. Now look at Joab, what he did. He was so tickled because he felt like, man, I really might be messed up here. The king's found out I did this, and the king could have really done anything to Joab. He could have got mad with Joab. He could have had ordered Joab to be killed. But it said Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself, and he thanked the king. And Joab said, today thy servant knoweth that I have found grace in thy sight, my lord, O king, and that the king hath fulfilled the request of his servant. So Joab arose. He went to Geshur, where Absalom was, and he brought Absalom to Jerusalem. Now, Absalom probably was happy. That was his home. He grew up in Jerusalem. He had to get out of there, and he had to go to a new place, sort of all alone, away from family. And the king said, but let him turn to his own house, and let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. Mark 24, that's an important verse. David brought him back, but he didn't try to solve the dispute. He says, bring him back. Tell him to go into his house. I don't want to see him. Basically, that's what the scripture's saying. And it's been a couple of years. Absalom probably wanted to try to make right with his daddy because he was upset with his dad anyway, because his daddy, when Amnon raped his sister, David did nothing about it. And it because of David's actions that he did nothing about correcting Amnon or punishing Amnon for what he did, it was because of that Absalom says, I've got to protect my sister. So I'll just take matters in my own hand. And his hate just was awesome for against Amnon, so he killed him. So after he left, and imagine in that whole period of time, you know how hate can fester up inside? He probably was just mad. Here I am, had to run away. My dad's still the king in the castle there and everything, and I wouldn't be in this situation if Dad would have done what he was supposed to do to start with. And I could just imagine that's the way Absalom was feeling. That hatred was just building up. But that was still his dad. He still respected his dad. So I really feel like when Joab had a way to bring him back to the house, he probably thought that maybe now I can go to my dad David. Maybe now we can work things out and things will be better. But I want you to realize he had all that period of time, and that rage just kept building. That's the reason it's not good when we have a dispute with somebody. It's not good to let it fester. At this church, we've not had a lot of issues, but we've had a few issues that had to be taken care of. And I've always tried, if something happened on Sunday, I was at wherever I needed to be on Monday trying to take care of it. I found if you let it go for a long period of time, then it just gets worse. Now, I've been able to solve every issue to come up? Absolutely not, but I give it my best shot. I always did biblically. The Bible says if you've got an issue with somebody, for you to go. And it says try to work it out. And then if they couldn't work it out with them, to get somebody and care with you and try to work it out. And I've always took that as a way that I tried to handle God's business. Biblically, exactly the way it is said. So we see that David now did not want to see him. But in all Israel, there was none to be so much praised as Absalom. What was he praised for? Man, his beauty. He was just beholden. I can imagine all the women just say, well, he's the best thing since sliced cornbread, man. And just look at Absalom. He was tall, he was handsome. Look what they say about him. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. Man, I counted one day and I had 30-some moles on my body. It made me jealous of Absalom. But it said he did not have the first blemish at all. And when he polled his head, and that's when he cut his hair. Poll means cut. When he cut his head or his hair, for it was every year's end that he polled it or cut it, because the hair was heavy on him. Therefore he cut it. And he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. And could you imagine what a head of hair that is, just how heavy and it was? And unto Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar also. And she was a woman, it says, of fair countenance. Both children, his sister Tamar and Absalom, of the wife that they were born of David, were beautiful children. So Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem and saw not the king's face. So for 2 years he was there. And for 2 years, when David brought him back to Jerusalem, he's still sitting, and he was away to the other place for a good while. And now for 2 years, and I know he kept waiting and wondering when the king's going to call me. Because really, even though he was the king's son, the son's not supposed to go to David until the king sends for him. So he was waiting. The whole time he was waiting, what was happening? Rage was building up that much more. And as more rage built up, when they finally got together, it was just not going to be good. Now, you're going to like what Absalom does here. Now, just watch this. Therefore, Absalom sent for Joab. He got tired of waiting. So Joab was the one that brought him there, right? So he said, well, I'm going to send for Joab, and I'm going to get Joab to get me in to see my dad. So therefore, Absalom sent for Joab to have sent him to the king. But he would not come to him. I probably just made Absalom that much madder, don't you imagine? That daddy won't call me. So I'll call Joab. I'll get Joab to carry me to the king, because he was ready to see the king now. Absalom waited as long as he wanted to wait. But he would not come. And when he sent again the second time, look what happened. He still would not come. Joab's just not coming. And that makes him, because he probably didn't even, when he sent for him, tell Joab to come see me. You don't call and say, I'm not coming. You just don't let it. You ever been in that situation before? Somebody's supposed to come at a certain time. They don't show up. They don't call you and tell you they're not coming. And you sat there. I hate for somebody to come tell me that they're coming at a certain time and they don't show up. And HTC, and I'm not faulting HTC. We just had to put internet service in at my mama's. So they had 2 appointments. They had one appointment they could come on one day, but the appointments would be from 8 to 5. And I says, you mean I got to sit here from 8 to 5 and wait? She said, yes, sir. I said, I don't want that one. I said, do you have another one? She said, yeah, we've got one from Wednesday from 3 to 5. I said, I'll take that one, because I did not like sitting there. And I have sat there when they tell me that before and wait, never got a call, and it never showed up. And I dedicated my whole day. So Joab here is upset with Absalom's upset with Joab now. So look what he said in verse 30. I like this. he's going to get Joab's attention. Therefore he said unto his servants, you see Joab's field is near mine, and he hath barley planted over there. He said, go set it on fire. Can you see that? What you imagine Joab's going to do when his field gets set on fire? And it says, Absalom's servant set the field on fire. And then in verse 31, I can see Joab. Joab arose and came to Absalom. I imagine he came to running unto his house. And he said unto him, wherefore have thy servant set my field on fire? And Absalom answered to him, says, behold, I sent unto thee, saying, come hither, that I may send thee that you may send me to the king to say. And said, you wouldn't come, so I'm going to get you here one way or the other. Wherefore I came from the Gersher. It had been good for me to have been there still. So you brought me from Gersher, and I've been here 2 years, and I ain't seen Daddy. It had been just as well you left me where I was at rather than bring me here. Now, therefore, let me see the king's face. And if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. Absalom was ready for it to come to a head. He was tired of waiting. He says, if Dad's going to kill me, whatever Dad's going to do to me, I can't get on with my life till I see what's going to happen. So Joab came to the king and told him when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king. Absalom, it says, bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Now maybe, usually when a king kisses somebody, that means forgiveness. That means everything's okay, that we don't have to worry about anything anymore. But for whatever reason, this was not enough for Absalom. Absalom at this time must have not got the response from David. This is all the Bible tells us. We don't need to add to it, but I'm just saying what's going to happen in chapter 15. Undoubtedly, Absalom was not happy with the way David greeted him and what David said or how David did things. Because we're going to see now in chapter 15 that Absalom is going to plan to take over his dad's kingdom. Now, we know this is going to happen because God told David, even though he forgave him, when he had that affair with Bathsheba. And we know that Nathan had to come and point out, and he had Uriah killed, and he says that you'll always have problems within your household going forward. That was told to David. And this is just God's word coming true. And I know David's going to think on that. And so he's always going to have problems. So in chapter 15 it says, and it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Now you're going to find as we talk here about Absalom, he's a very good politician. He's got to find some way to win the people over. Because the people, if they love David, they're not going to pay him any attention at all. But they know that he's David's son. Now, how did David win over the people when Saul was king? He was a good warrior. He could go fight. It said Saul killed his 1,000, but David killed his tens of thousands. Now, it doesn't say anything about Absalom being that great a warrior, but he was a good politician. He was good about talking with people. You've seen these politicians that are smooth talkers. They're good back slappers. They can shake your hand, slap you on the back. Yeah, what you need? I'll get that done for you. I count on your vote. Yeah, I want you to vote for me. Yes, sir. I'll take care of that. That road you won't pave by your house, you get me an office. I'll get that road paved. As soon as you get in office, they won't even take your phone calls once you get back in office. That's the way a good politician is. He just wants to get into office. So we see that Absalom now is beginning to prepare. He's got him some chariots. He's got him some horses. Looks real good to have 50 men running in front of you, don't it? He's got him 50 men to run before him. And it said Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. Now the gate is where everybody come with their problems. That was a place coming to the king. They sort of come there. He knew that was a place to meet everybody who had a grievance that was going to try to get to go see the king. So he knew where it was. So he went there early in the morning when everybody was coming. He knew right where to go stand. He knew right when to go talk to the people and watch what he did. And it was so that when any man that had a controversy, see, if you had a controversy, you had to go to the king for the king to solve it. Any man that had a controversy that was coming to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, of what city art thou? And he said, thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. He's finding out, are you in this district or where we govern and stuff? And he said, well, I'm of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, see, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputized, and that's what deputed means, deputized of the king to hear thee. King David's not put anybody there that can hear your complaint. But boy, if you would put me in that place, boy, I could help you. Just watch how he says this. And Absalom said, moreover, oh, that I were made a judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. Absalom knew all the right things to say to the people, to get the people to start thinking, well, I believe Absalom will be a little better than King David. King David ain't promised to do any of that for us. And it was so that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and tucked him and kissed him. That's the backslapping I was talking about. He would just wrap him up, hug his neck, and give him a kiss. Hey, man, just remember me. I can help you out. And on this matter did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. And it took him a while, but he says, I'm going to do this. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So now, even though he stole the hearts of the men of Israel, that was the first step. Now he's got to go a step farther and be able to get daddy out of the king's seat. And it came to pass after 40 years. Now, I want you to know I've studied that out, and I believe we should take the Bible literal, but everywhere I've studied, they said the word 40 there is a misprint. That aspect, because 40 years does not make sense here, because, Absalom ain't waited 40 years for this. And if you read every translation everywhere else, that's supposed to be 4 rather than 40. It said they believed when it was written, it was just a misprint in the writing. And this here, it says 40 was apparently miscopied and should read 4 years, as read by the Septuagint and the Syriac versions, and to be given as Josephus. So just want to let you know that. We won't argue about it. If you want to believe it's 40, it's all right. But everything I said it should be 4. Sort of like J. Vernon McGee. If you want to believe it's 40 years, that's fine. It might be some other people with you. If you want to be right, believe what I believe. And that's sort of how J. Vernon McGee likes to say it, So I'll use J. Vernon McGee there. And it came to pass after 4 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. So Absalom's come to King David and says, let me go to this place. I've made a vow. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode in Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said unto him, will you go in peace, Absalom? So he arose and he went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. He was going to Hebron not to do anything good, but to take over. That was his place that he was going to take over. Not in Jerusalem at that time, but he was going to Hebron. He sent spies out to all the 12 different tribes. Do I have your support? Do I have your support? Do I have your support? And when Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite. Ahithophel is the guy that was always with David. It was Bathsheba's grandfather. And he'd always served David. But look, he's going to switch sides. This is very important. He was David's counselor from the city, even from Gilead, while he offered sacrifice, and his conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. So the takeover is taking place right ahead. Now, David, I don't know if they kept it from him. I don't know if David, just being his son, he just turned a blind ear, because, naturally David would not want to go fight against his son. If it had been anybody else, David might have rose up and said, we're going to put this down right now. But we're going to see now that when it's told to David, in verse 13 here, he's going to leave. And there came messengers to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. That means they're with Absalom, King David. And David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, he didn't say, arise and let us go fight. He says, arise and let us flee. For we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servants said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. If David had told them, let's fight, they would have fought, but David's not ready to fight. He's just ready to get out of Jerusalem. And the king went forth, and all his household after him. And the king left 10 women. This is very important because Absalom is going to do something very bad with these concubines that's left. But David left 10 women which were concubines, not wives. They were concubines to keep the house. They were still with his women, part of his harem. It is believed that David felt by doing this, he'd always felt like he would be coming back. Because he left the women here, because he would have took them if he thought he was going to be banished forever. But it said this is a sign that he felt like he'd be coming back, because I'm going to leave these 10 women here to keep the house in order, to keep it looked after. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off. And all his servants passed on beside him, and all the Cherethites, and the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, and 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. So he had a big group that was with him. Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger, and also an exile. Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us, seeing I go whether I may return thou, and take back thy brother, mercy and truth be with thee. And Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. He didn't want to go back. King was trying to tell him, you need to go back. And David said to Ittai, go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men and all the little ones that was with him. So he went forward. And it says, all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. And the king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. And lo, Zadok also, and all the Levites were with him. And they were bearing the ark of the covenant of God. He'd got the ark of the covenant, but watch what David said. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had done passing out of the city. And the king said to Zadok, I want you to carry back the ark of God into the city. That's strange, because you would think David would want the ark of God with him. Because whoever possessed the ark of God, it meant that you had God with him. But look what David's reasoning was. He says, if I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will once again bring me again and show me both it and its habitation. He trusted the Lord and said, instead of me just taking it with him, if it be the Lord's will that I come back, he'll make a way. But if he thus say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here I am. Here am I. Let him do to me as seemeth good unto him. David was at peace because he knows that Nathan had told him all this would come about. And he says, if this is the way the Lord wants to do it, then who be I to fight against it? And the king said also unto Zadok the priest, art not thou a seer? Return, that's a prophet, by the way. Return unto the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz thy son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. And see, I will tarry in the plain of the wilderness until there come word from you to certify me. So Zadok therefore and Abiathar carried the ark of God again to Jerusalem, and they tarried there. And David went up by the ascent of the Mount Olivet, and look what he did. He wept as he went up. And as he went up, he had his head covered, and he went barefoot. And it says all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they all went up weeping as they went. He was torn. Everybody, as they saw the king cried, they cried with the king. I know David was heartbroken that his own son would be doing this to him. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. and that's his counselor. That's the grandfather of Bathsheba. And that had to hurt him even more because he was a faithful counselor with David. And David said, "O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." And it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount, where he worshiped God, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and earth upon his head. And unto whom David said, "If thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden to me." This gentleman that come here was somebody that David loved in such a way, but he was an old man. That's what David meant by "you will be a burden to me." He would ask for him to go back and be with his son Absalom for the sole purpose of being a spy. But he says, we're going to have a tough time because David's getting ready to not live in a castle. He's getting ready to live back in the caves and the wooded areas. It's going to be bad. And so when you see what he said to Hushai here, the Archite, that's what he meant by being a burden to me, because you're so old and you're feeble and your health is not good. But he says, "But if thou return to the city, and you'll say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant. Hitherto so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel." He says, I need somebody there, because he knew Ahithophel was good, but says, if you'll go there, I can find out what he's telling Absalom to do, and you can be my ears. "And hast thou not there with thee Zadok and Abiathar the priests? Therefore it shall be that what things soever thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. And behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz and Zadok's son, and Jonathan Abiathar's son. And by them you shall send unto me everything that you can hear." So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. And we'll stop there. And you know, that Samuel, the reason I want to go through it, is one of the greatest stories in the Bible, to see a man that's truly a man after God's own heart. But we see David didn't do a lot of things right, man. And you know, for me, that's an encouragement to me, because I fall short each and every day. But I see that David was just the same way. He just made bad decisions, made bad choices, but yet God still loved him. God still called him a man after God's own heart. We have a song we can sing. I always like to just close with a song.